Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. So today I wanted to discuss with you the sacred and the shadow sides to specifically the feminine, from maiden to mother. Okay, the reason that I wanted to include a big section on motherhood in this video and also on my Patreon page, I'm going to be writing all about the goddesses that I've worked with in the last couple of years. Specifically, I worked with different ones at different stages of both being a maiden, being pregnant, giving birth, and after my child was born. And the information that the stories that these goddesses bring through has helped me immensely with my own healing, with my own reflection. And so I just wanted to share a little bit of that today with you, maybe tell a couple of personal stories. And actually I'm going to be offering this information, this guide to working with the goddesses for sacred and shadow purposes on my Patreon page, so you can check that out. But essentially, I have never done shadow work as deeply as when I had my son. The main reason is that even though I'd done shadow work before and thought I'd accomplished a certain level of shadow work before I became a mother, that wasn't fully the case, because even though I got to a certain level, I was quite surprised throughout this last 16 months that my son's been here. I've been quite surprised in moments how off guard I've found myself in regards to my shadow. So when anybody asks me what has motherhood been like, I usually say it's been harder than I thought it would be, because I had this opinion that I would be quite an empathic mother and that I would be very understanding, and any of the times that I'd seen other parents be kind of rude or even cruel with their children, just really moody, right? Anytime I'd seen that in the world, I always made a mental note of it, I would never do that. And I think I made that mental note for a reason, so that I could actually live up to that expectation, that thing that I'm shooting for, which is to be more like light consciousness and more kind, loving, understanding, nurturing. That was a goal for me in my mind. What I didn't know was that I would have to go through a lot of shadow work during the process of bringing up my child. So if there's anything that I can do here, my hope is that I can give you some of the information that I would have liked to have had to prepare me for some of the shadow work that comes with the sacred work of being a mother. But one of the things that I want to say is that, it's the whole, a thorn of experience is worth way more than a wilderness of warning. And I'm not saying any of this to put you off, by the way. I haven't even gotten started. But what I'm about to share with you isn't to put you off doing shadow work or becoming a mother or a parent. It's not to put you off those things, it's to prepare you. Because if there's anything that I felt a lot of guilt and shame over, it's that I've had to almost practice with my son through some of my shadow moments. So I'll give you an example. There's been moments where I'm so tired and stressed and feeling alone that in the middle of me not being able to comfort my son, he's maybe screaming, crying, I'm trying to get stuff done at the same time as look after him. Even if I'm paying attention to him, it can still be a similar situation. I can't always placate him. So the nurturing aspect of myself that I thought was really in check hasn't always been in check at all. It's been completely the opposite. I've been in the middle of trying to reparent myself sometimes, right? And in the middle of all of that, the tendency to project the frustration and the sadness and the pain onto the screaming child, right? That has been my number one. Oh my goodness, I didn't know that I could do that. I thought that I was a very empathic person. I thought that, you know, essentially I would never do that to a child. But it's happened. I've shouted. I've gotten so wound up that I just want to break things, right? And it's only until I became a mother that I was like, whoa, this shadow side of me is frightening. Like I say, I thought I'd done shadow work before, but when it comes up for real, like you're almost in the middle of not being in control of yourself, then you get to have an awareness. Because until you've really had your shadow side come out, i.e. with a child that's innocent, you don't quite understand the full feeling of that. The feeling of it is you have a lot of judgment towards yourself. You almost go unconscious. There's been a couple times where I've gotten into such a bad place mentally and emotionally with my son that I've almost blanked out, just completely blanked out. And again, the reason I'm telling you is because I wasn't aware of that before. This part of me, I wasn't aware of how deep that it could go. Because when you're a mother, you understand, and a father, you understand what sacrifice means, you know, and it's a whole new life that made into mother. It's a whole new world, and yeah, it can be all those things, extremely stressful and just, whoa, what did I get myself into, right? But the part about it that is sacred work is that it pushes you to become your best. So what I mean is, before I had a child, I did shadow work, but I was still kind of like judgy and just not like, you know, if my shadow came out in a moment where I'm shouting really loud at someone and just kind of being unconscious about my role in that. And we're going to get into the shadow a bit deeper in just a moment here, because there is some confusion about what your shadow is. Basically, it's unique to you, right? But I'll get into that a bit more. But when it would come out with, say, my husband or someone else, I would feel justified. I would be like, well, you know, and sometimes I was. Sometimes I was genuinely standing up for myself and having a boundary and saying, no, you don't get to speak to me like that, or something like that, right? But with a child, yes, you have to civilize them and you have to discipline them. That's part of it. Like, you can't, like, I've swung into the opposite pendulum before, where I've felt really, you know, guilty as a mother, and just started letting my son do whatever he wanted. Because it's like, well, I can understand why you're doing this, and I can understand why you're doing that. And there's a certain level of that kind of, you know, it's called gentle parenting, or like emotional understanding of why they do certain things. But when you swing to the complete opposite pendulum, i.e. you're not letting any of your shadow out, you're not expressing any of your anger, now you become a doormat. And your child, or whomever you're with, will use you to push your boundaries until you eventually stand up and say no. And you eventually, you know, put the person in their place, or if it's the child that's maybe just keeps doing something that's, you know, not good for them, you discipline them. So it will push you. And like I say, the reason that I didn't maybe go as deep and quickly shift this shadow work in the past before having a child is because I didn't recognize just how shadowy it was until I saw several times that projection of hate coming out onto a young innocent child. That's when I stood back and said to myself, this has got to become, I've got to become aware of this. This cannot go into my unconscious space and just be blanked out. This is why I would ever do shadow work, is so that I don't spend all this energy trying to repress this side of myself and forget that it exists. I would much rather continually find healthy ways to express this shadow. So essentially, it can look like realizing that maybe somewhere along the line, you know, you've not gotten your needs met. Like, I think some of the most hard times that I've had so far, where I've really gotten into my shadow self, has been when my needs aren't being met. I'm feeling depleted, I'm feeling so tired, and just where is my support? And then the reason that I can go into those shadow places is because I'm actually annoyed at myself for not asking for more help, for not standing up for myself and saying, hey, I can't just do this all alone. Like, I need some support. I need to have my own time for myself. All of these things. And again, until you're pushed to breaking point, sometimes that side of you just doesn't come out. Like, if you're watching this video, if you've been part of this channel for a while, you might be on the pendulum swing of the people that, I'll speak for myself. I know that I have for a long time repressed my anger, because I saw anger. I saw it coming up as a child with people around me. And I had an unconscious belief created, which was that anger equals violence. I don't like violence. I don't want it to be part of my world. Therefore, belief system is created. I will not express anger. Okay? Now, obviously, that I have expressed anger in the last 20 years of my life, obviously. But there's been plenty of situations where I've told myself that my anger isn't warranted. And what I have to say about emotions when it comes to shadow work is that you should always listen to the emotion. What you should be careful of listening to is the action that the emotion is feeding. So, for example, one of the ways that I've found to have better boundaries and to have to do to not have to go into that explosive shadow space that I can sometimes go into, one of the ways that I found is to practice, because it does take practice. If for a long time you've been kind of a doormat and a bit of a people pleaser because you haven't really used your anger because you've been afraid of it, one of the things to do is actually to start trusting your anger again and be like, oh, okay, this anger is coming up because this is genuinely where I'm at in my experience. And one of the things that you can do with shadow work is to understand that this anger gets to be expressed in a way that best suits me in the situation. It's not that this anger doesn't get to be expressed, gets to be repressed, gets to not be looked at or accepted whatsoever. That is the problem. When we repress something, that is where it turns into this bigger shadow, right? Because a lot of the time people will try, like as a healing mechanism, people in the world will try to actually wear their shadow. Sometimes it's out of deviancy, like you can go too far and just kind of get obsessed with your shadow side and think that it's really cool and that it's just this thing that you want to use to kind of fight other people all the time. But the balanced version of it is that you you express to the world where you're at, or you express to yourself, doesn't matter if it's to the world or not, you express to yourself where you're at in terms of your life's work, your sacred and your shadow side. And those people end up getting more cathartic benefit from that than the people that try to fit in with everybody else, that don't ever acknowledge the deeper, darker side to themselves, and end up taking it out on somebody else who is expressing their shadow more readily. So what it can mean is that the reason that we're afraid to express anger, for example, is because we don't want other people to jump down our necks. We don't want to start confrontation. We don't want to have other people dislike us. But we always have to be the ones to advocate for ourselves and like ourselves above anyone and anything else. We have to be our own best friend. Doesn't matter about other people in that respect. We have to be our own best friend. And then from that place, we have to understand that this emotion that is coming up is there. You can't just get rid of it. You can shift it. But the only way to shift it is to go through some kind of expression with it. And again, if you want to know how to express this side of things, like, I'm available through my Patreon page to give you advice through the write-ups that I do, specifically looking at shadow goddesses at the moment, and how their stories can help you unfold some of your own archetypal stories that have happened through you, and take out some of the personal bite of it, and actually allow you to take smaller bites out of it, you know, like the story that triggers you so much about yourself that you run away from, that you hide from. Some of these archetypal frameworks and stories can help you digest some of that stuff and actually start to take a look and not just keep putting your head in the sand. But essentially, this shadow work, the reason you'd want to do it is because the more energy you spend on trying to repress your shadow, the less energy you have in the world, and the more unconscious you actually are. Whereas if you are somebody that's aware of your flaws and you're actively, consciously working with them on a daily basis, you're no longer afraid of yourself, you're no longer afraid of other people. You understand where things come from, and you understand how to channel those more negative emotions into better action, right? And that's essentially it. For me, in the middle of feeling really frustrated, not with my son, but if I'm in the middle of already feeling very frustrated and he is feeling that and expressing that through his body, but I'm overstimulated and I can't deal with the sound, one of the ways that I've found that is the only way through is to just breathe like for 10 seconds. And like I say, it's shifted. Like, I've noticed over this last year and a half that actually I've gotten a lot better with controlling my temper. I've gotten, you know, some way anyway better toward being more of a balanced person. You know, my shadow and sacred side is more balanced. My masculine feminine side, the more work I do, the more practice I put in to doing this work, the better of a person I become. And doing that work consciously is breaking these cycles, is breaking these patterns that are very tempting to go into. Sometimes we go into these old patterns of, again, not swinging the pendulum onto the other side of complete just, I let them do whatever they want, or I just become unconditional love and I love everything. There is an element to truth in that your spark is that unconditional love. But you also have to be your own protector, and anger is your protector. So you have to listen to your emotions. They're there for a reason. But essentially, the more you talk about this work, the more you read about this work, the more you immerse yourself in this self-improvement work, the more conscious you become. And your blind spots start to become seen. And you might be in the middle of talking to someone, you might be in the middle of doing something, and you're like, oh, I'm actually noticing my shadow self come up right now. Why is that? What's going on here? Is it just, does it have a link to the external in the, there's something genuinely going wrong here? How can I make this right? Or is it just something that is untrained in my mind that needs to be told to get out? Sometimes we carry old habitual patterns from the past, mentally, physically, where our body's gotten used to a certain frequency and it likes to repeat that frequency. You know, maybe it could be laziness, it could be procrastination, those kind of things. But it's an old program from the past that we have to now be the adult and say, no, I'm not doing that anymore. You can leave me now, okay? I'm doing this. And we have to use, a lot of discipline, a lot of discernment when it comes to this side of ourselves, because it can be very ephemeral. We can't always grasp onto what it is we're grappling with and struggling with. But the more you do this work, the more you write about it, the more you read about it, journal about it, get one-on-one sessions with it, do meditations with it, that kind of stuff, the more you will become conscious of it. And when you become conscious of it, you can actually take a knee almost to yourself and humble down and say, this thing that I thought was somebody else creating a problem the whole time, actually it was an errant paradigm in me. And that's not always the case, by the way. Sometimes it genuinely is the other person that we have to stand our guard and boundary with. And we have to make mistakes. We have to live forward. Not have to, but what I'm saying is you can't be perfect, right? God is perfect, maybe, and that's what we're shooting for. But you can't just isolate yourself and think that that's going to be best, because that way your shadow's never going to come out, and that way, you're not going to hurt anybody or yourself. You're just going to kind of stay stagnant. And that's essentially what you'll do, because I had that belief for a long time that I should isolate and just not be around people because it's just too painful, and it's just full of stuff that I don't understand and overwhelming. The more you put yourself in those situations with a bit of preparation, i.e. that you've done some of this work and you're like, you know what, I'm ready to face what today is going to bring out of me, because it's going to bring it out of me for a reason. And the more you do that, the more you'll start to maybe have some uncomfortable moments with yourself and be like, okay, that probably wasn't my best face forward. But you can have compassion for yourself, and you can have understanding, and you can get back to that peace once you know that this is all part of it. Failing forward is part of it, because eventually you'll get to a stage where you've done a lot of this work, and there's always more, but there's also a stage where you start to increase what you're asking for from the universe. Okay, universe, I've done a lot of this work, I've become a better person, now I believe in myself, because I'm not judging myself constantly, because I'm understanding that, this is coming from there, and I just need to give myself one of my needs so that I'm not flipping out and just transforming into pure shadow mode all the time. I guess what I'm trying to say is, as long as you're making your shadow conscious, you can work with it, no problem. It's if you're using your shadow and being unconscious about it, you might just not be in the right place for it yet in your life, or if you're using it to actually hurt people. Now, you doing that consciously, now that is a problem. You are going to create more chaos for yourself and others. You don't want to do that. You want to try and go down the space of, I'm humble to the fact that this is what I'm here to do, and I know that there will be joy and peace and tranquility on the other side of it. Once I'm ready to allow myself to go through this process. Like I say, you can't prepare for everything. Sometimes you just have to be in the moment, and that's what motherhood has been for me, is I've just been in the moment, and the emotions and the thoughts have arisen and the actions have followed, and there hasn't been a gap in between those two things. So that's why I say, like, take 10 seconds to take a breath before you act on something, whether it be shout, whether it be just whatever it is that you know is maybe not what you want to do. Like maybe you go and avoid and isolate yourself. And for a time that might be what you need, but you'll get quicker with shifting the shadow. So essentially you shift the shadow into more of your sacred behavior. And that, I think, is the best inner work we can be doing here. Whilst we're doing this other work, this everyday mundane stuff, this inner work is super powerful, and it is shifting the world that we live in when more of us do this kind of work. So like I say, if you want access to the goddesses that may be able to help you through some of this, that's what this month's Patreon write-up is going to be about. I will be getting to the sacred goddesses, and I'll also be getting to the shadow and sacred gods as well eventually, so we can balance out our masculine and feminine. But that's what this month is all about, is our shadow feminine, and releasing and expressing and shifting that space in us. So I hope you found that this has been helpful to you. And if you would like to work with me one-on-one, then you can. You can send me an email at MissSynchronicity@gmail.com, 3 S's. And I will see you in the next video. Take care.